H&K fans, MR762 out to long distance. Let's see what she's capable of. How does the H&K MR762 perform at longer ranges? If that's something you're curious about, stick around because we're going to take a deep dive into that exact question in this video. While I'm putting my rifle through its paces, you got to let me know in the comments down below. What's your opinion of the MR762? It seems like it's a rifle that people either love or hate, and there's not a ton of middle ground there. So also let me know, have you had a chance to shoot an MR762, and if so, were you able to shoot it out to distance, and what was your experience? If you haven't had a chance, what is your expectations for my rifle out to distance? I'd love to hear it at the comments. Then I'm going to run my rifle. At the end of the video, we'll meet back up and review my performance and see how it stacks up versus our expectations. Now you think about this MR762, what is this rifle? It's not really a true sniper rifle. You think about what the military runs as the M110A1 squad designated marksman rifle. That is a rifle that is going to be lighter and more maneuverable than a true sniper rifle or precision rifle, while allowing you to put more accurate fire on targets at longer ranges than a traditional fighting carbine. So it's kind of a nice happy medium between a sniper rifle or dedicated precision rifle and a fighting rifle. To me, it means the ability to put fire on, say, a man-sized torso out to about 800 yards using M118 long-range ammo. And that's exactly what we're going to test in this video. So this should be super fun. I don't have a ton of rounds on this rifle. It's fairly new to me. I like shooting it. I'm really excited to push it out to distance. I haven't had a chance to push the distance on this rifle at all yet, so I'm really curious to see what kind of performance I get. So what's in store for this video? Well, you already saw me there in the intro put a handful of rounds on a 12-inch plate there at 330 yards. So really beautiful performance off of my 2VETS tripod, kind of a hasty position, getting onto a target from a field position and shooting a realistic sized target. No problem for this rifle. We've already established that. From here though, we're going to move down to 100 yards and I'm going to give you a close-up look at the baseline of performance for accuracy and velocity using two different loads of ammunition. Once we establish that baseline at 100 yards, then we'll push out on steel at further distances beyond the 330 that we've already shot. I plan to put that 12-inch plate out there at about 500 yards and then a full-size IPSC out there at about 800 yards. And if we're making consistent impacts, maybe we'll push out even further and really try to stretch the legs on this rifle and see what it's capable of. A 16-inch 308 is a challenge to shoot, and especially challenging today as we have some crazy winds out here. It's nuts how windy it is. I apologize for the wind noise. I hope it's not too loud with my microphone, but I really wanted to get out here and shoot in this wind because that's how you get better. So what are we going to run for gear in this video? Certainly the rifle is going to be a factory H&K MR762. No modifications to it, just as it came out of the package. In my mind, this is very representative of the military M110A1 package. There's definitely some differences, but the rifle itself, the operating system, the barrel, all the same. Specifically, this rifle was part of the H&K LRP3 package. So it actually came from H&K with a different scope on it, different bipod that I actually swapped out for gear that I've run previously and have a ton of confidence and a ton of time behind. So factory rifle, out of the box, no modifications. For an optic, we're going to run my Ride-On 7 Conquer 3-18. This is a scope you've seen many times on the channel. I've got a ton of rounds on this. I've made a ton of impacts out to distance with it. It's a very nice scope. I really like the Christmas tree reticle in it. It's very clean, easy to use, and this is a very premium scope. In my mind, 3-18 is just about perfect for a squad designated marksman, as it gives you enough magnification to zoom up and see those targets up close, but then you can back out, say to 3 power, and get that wide field of view to find your next target. It's mounted in a zero gravity 34mm 1.5-inch mount. So I really like these zero gravity mounts because they are unique in that the rings are hinged and only have one set of bolts or screws here at the top. So it's really easy to mount this up and get it torqued properly. Also, the way those rings hinge over, it doesn't put weird torque on the scope body as there's only one spot for it to mount. You torque it down, you're good to go. I've had a really good success with these zero gravity mounts. I appreciate their support. Ride-On sent the scope to me, Zero Gravity sent the mount to me for use on the channel. For ammo that we're going to run, I have two loads. The first one is going to be an M118 LR load from Winchester. So this is Winchester match ammunition. I think I bought it from SG Ammo a while back. This is supposed to be true M118 LR. We're going to run this at 100 yards and see how it performs for accuracy and velocity, but I can tell you, I've run a lot of this ammunition and it seems to shoot 1 to 1.5 MOA. But the thing that I notice is the velocity spread is pretty extreme. So we'll see if that holds true in the 16-inch barrel. The other load that I want to run through this rifle is Federal Gold Medal Match with the 185 Berger Juggernaut. So this is premium ammunition. I bought this a while ago. I run a handful of rounds through it, but that 185 Berger Juggernaut has a much higher G7 BC. It's a little bit heavier than the 175. But the moral of the story here is this should really allow us to push the distance on this rifle with some solid consistency. So we'll see how it shoots at 100 yards, see what we get for velocity, and then hopefully I can push this out maybe beyond 800 yards if the rifle is performing. So other gear that we'll have in the video, you've already seen my 2 Vets tripod. They're in the intro. They sent this to me recently. I'm just starting to spend some time on it. Really appreciate their support on my channel. This is a very nice tripod. This thing is awesome. And in my opinion, a tripod is an absolute must for the precision rifle shooter, as it allows you to shoot from many different positions, up off of the tripod or use it as a rear support. This thing is a must. Since I've been using a tripod the past year or so, I realized how invaluable that talent and tool and skill set is. I'd encourage you, if you're into precision rifles and you don't have a tripod, put that on your must purchase list. So maybe I'll do a review of this 2 Vets down the road. This is my second time out to the range with it. So far, I'm really happy with it. Seems like a very nice tripod. Also, you'll find up here some ear protection, as well as my eye protection that I have on right now. And this is from Warbird Pro. This is a fairly new company, and I want to give them a shout out, as they reached out to support my channel, and I want to help them out, maybe help you out, as they've given me a coupon code to provide. So maybe you're in the market for ear protection, or eye protection, or even soft body armor. Check out Warbird Pro and then use my code MULLETS to get yourself 10% off of your order. So from here, what are we gonna do? Let's move down to 100 yards, fire this rifle up, and then at the end of the video, we'll revisit this spot and wrap up a summary of my experience shooting this 7.62 out to distance. First things first, I wanted to put the H&K MR762 on paper at 100 yards with our M118 LR load, as well as a couple of rounds of the Federal Gold Medal Match 185 Juggernaut load. So first thing I did was get the rifle zeroed. I did that off camera, took a couple of rounds. Then I fired 4 5-round groups with the M118 LR starting in the upper left corner. So as you watch the footage of me shooting, you'll see my very first round was the high flyer here in this group, and then the next 4 stacked into this group, measuring 1.5 inches overall. And then I reloaded the magazine, so maybe a minute or so, fired this group, which measures 1.3 inches overall. Reload the magazine. The 4 down here, 1.25 inches overall. Reload the magazine, and then finally wrapped up with the 5 down here. I did have one that flew a little bit high, but ultimately that group was 1.6 inches overall. So with the M118 LR, I'm seeing probably average accuracy in the 1.25" range with a couple of flyers that could have been me. Now that M118 LR load, if you saw the velocity on the chronograph, it is really across the board, very big spread. 100 feet per second spread with an average of like 2440, 2445, and the true ballistic chronograph calculated a G7 BC of 0.246. So we'll see how that performs out to distance. Then the barrel had some heat in it. I went ahead and loaded up 5 rounds, the 185 Federal Gold Medal Match Juggernaut load. Those 5 rounds went into 1.1 inches. Point of impact is almost identical, so that'll be really slick when we start to push the distance out further. In this one, the velocity on it was about 2435, much lower spread, and the true ballistic chronograph calculated a G7 BC of 0.286, which is really cool because if you check out what Berger publishes on that bullet, it's almost spot on. So according to what the chronograph found, it is identical to what Berger publishes. This is going to be a really slick load to push out to some pretty far distances. So with that, let's start shooting some steel. I just ran down and set up my steel, so let's send our first rounds out there. I got a 12-inch circle, what ranges at 520 yards, and I've got a full-size IPSC out there at 860 yards. I feel like those are realistic targets and distances for a DMR type rifle. These first rounds will be the 175 M118 LR, and I'm going to shoot them off of my new 2 Vets Recon tripod. I feel like this is a realistic field type situation, so I love shooting off tripods. I'm excited to get this one out. is at, call it 3.6 mils. 1 mil right, seems to be the ticket there at 520 yards. No problem on a 12-inch circle. Let's push on out a little bit further. Happy with that performance at 520 yards, 12-inch plate. Now let's hit that full-size zipstick out there at 860. My app was calling for 9.2, but I'm only going to dial on 9, given we were a little bit high there at 520. And then windage, we're making impacts of 1 mil. Let's go 2 mils. You can see that's the Hornady hit indicator that's just flashing constantly in the wind. Very sensitive. I can't get it to quit actually in the wind. First round impact, 2 mils. That's awesome. And round. That seemed weird shot. Stay at 2. Alright. I don't know how that's died, but dead on. Off the left edge. Off the right edge. How that wind changed. That first round impact I was holding 2 mils right, and then it shifted and I was holding like 0.2, 0.3 left to get those last couple of impacts. Let's try a couple of more rounds. That was strange. That shift in wind out there at 860 was wild. We wrapped up with 2 impacts. I've loaded up some more rounds, and I want to see if we're still there at 0.2 to 0.3 left to make some more impacts. 9 mils up. Now we're back to a little right about a half. Left edge. I believe that was an impact. Shifting wind out there. We got quite a few impacts and some stout wind with a 16-inch 308. How about we try to push further? So I ran down, put up my full-size IPSC out there at 1100 yards, and I swapped over to the higher BC 185 Juggernaut Federal Gold Medal match load. Now my shooter app is calling for 13.8 mils, so I'll go ahead and dial that on. And the shooter app is calling for 2 mils right windage. We saw a lot of variation there at 860 shifty, but I'm gonna start with that 2 mil right hold and just see where we land. Wind still seems to be coming at about 12 to 15 out of the 3 to 4 o'clock. And the windage flag is still pushing to the left. I did have to take my head indicator light off because it just kept constantly flashing. So 2 mils right. It actually seemed to be about 1 mil. Call it a half. Wind flag has died. Impact. Got a half. Off that right edge. Man, it's almost like dead on. That left edge. Right edge. Just over it. Off the left edge. So not that consistent out there at 1100. It seemed like my elevation of 13.8 is pretty solid, but that windage is quite the challenge. Wow, what a tough day of shooting. You shoot a 16-inch 308 in crazy winds that are changing speeds. It makes for a challenging day on the range. Maybe not the most fun day on the range, but it's important to get outside of your comfort zone and challenge yourself. That's where you grow new skills and get new experiences to become better in the long run. Now, let's take a couple of minutes and summarize my experience running the MR762 out to distance. While I'm doing that, let me know in the comments down below, how did the rifle perform versus what you expected? So at 100 yards, we saw what I felt like was very acceptable performance. With the M118 LR, we fired 20 rounds, 4 5-shot groups that all landed, I would say, an average of probably just over 1.25 inches. Those groups seem to range from 1.25 inches up to about 1.5 inches. And that's pretty solid for 20 rounds fired in a short amount of time. Very acceptable for an SDM rifle. The disappointing piece about that M118LR was the extreme velocity spread, pushing 100 feet per second, the huge standard deviation. That kind of velocity spread, even though the average was about 24.45, 24.50, which is acceptable, average was fine. That velocity spread is going to make it really challenging to push that M118LR out to distance with consistency. You saw that round perform quite well at the shorter ranges, but I feel like had I tried to push the 175 out far, we would have seen some pretty crazy velocity and elevation differences that I really couldn't control for. At 100 yards, we saw great performance out of the 185 Berger Juggernaut. That landed at about 1.1 inches or roughly 1 MOA. Velocity on the average was about 24.35, which is great from a 16-inch barrel. And then that higher BC of something like 0.286 made for a very efficient round to push out to distance. Now the really cool thing there, the G7 BC that the chronograph gathered of 0.286 is almost spot on for what Berger publishes for that bullet. So really cool to see that FX True Ballistic chronograph, that data matching up with what the manufacturer publishes. So in my opinion, very acceptable and good performance at 100 yards out of both rounds. In the intro, you saw me have no problems with the rifle on a 12-inch plate at 330 yards off of the tripod, a little bit of a wobbly position, but that's very realistic. And I only had one miss that could have been me. Might have jerked that one. Then we pushed out, we put rounds on the 12-inch plate out there at about 520 yards. We landed out there with multiple impacts, really had no problem connecting, had a little bit of elevation adjustment to make, held my wind, and I believe we went 5 for 6, if I remember correctly. Had no problem, again, off of the tripod from a seated position, kind of a hasty field position, very realistic for an SDM or squad designated marksman type rifle. From there, we pushed out to the full-size IPSC at 860 yards, still using the M118 LR. In my mind, that is a target and a distance that is kind of on the max effective range of this setup. And you saw me have a little bit of challenge there. I can't really chalk that challenge up to the rifle as much as 16-inch 308 in crazy winds. That was a wild course of fire. Actually, if I remember right, I fired 20 rounds. I think I connected 9 times out there. But what I saw in that course of fire, elevation was pretty consistent, seemed to be pretty solid out there at about 9 mils. But man, that wind was wild. We had impacts holding 2 mils right. We had impacts holding something like a half mil left, all within the same course of fire. So it was wild to see the impact of the wind on this cartridge. Again, I can't chalk that up to the rifle. I actually feel like the rifle performed quite well. I had no problems really shooting this rifle accurately. It was just that wind was changing so much, I was struggling to keep up as a shooter. Because I was feeling good at how he shot there at 860, I decided to push that full-size IPSC out to 1100, swap over to the 185 Burger Juggernaut, and unfortunately, we only went 3 for 10. I was hoping for a little bit better performance out there, but again, the wind was nuts. A 16-inch 308 in this kind of wind, even though that's a big target, that is a challenge. So 3 out of 10, 30% impact. I'll take it. It is what it is. We made some hits. I was hoping for more though. I feel like maybe on a less windy day or a more consistent windy day, I could have pushed that hit percent up a little bit higher. Ultimately though, we saw that 185 Juggernaut landing out there at about 13.5 mils at 1100 yards. According to my shooter app, it's still supersonic. So we should be performing quite well with that 185 Juggernaut out there. I don't feel like the 175 would have fared very well out there, which is why I swapped over to the 185. Higher BC, better velocity, or a smaller velocity spread, lower standard deviation is going to give me better elevation performance out there at distance. So ultimately, happy with the rifle out there at 1100. Wish I could have done better for you as a shooter, but those winds were crazy challenging. So overall, I'm happy with the performance. I'd love to put some more rounds and spend more time on this rifle because it seems like a nice shooter. So what do I think about the rifle? Well, these were some of my first rounds through it. Accuracy-wise at 100 yards, I'm happy with it. I'd like to see it a little bit better. Maybe with some better ammunition or some hand loads, I could shrink those groups down to the 1 MOA range. I think the potential is there. I think that M118 LR load was maybe just holding the rifle back a little bit. As far as the rifle and how it performs, it's a solid rifle. The fit and finish is very nice. I'm really impressed with the fit and finish. I'm really impressed with the upper and lower lockup. There's absolutely no play there. And I can't say that about all of my other large frame ARs. I love how tight the lockup is there. The trigger on this leaves quite a bit to be desired. That trigger, I actually don't know if it's published as a single stage or a 2-stage trigger. If it's a single stage trigger, there is a lot of take up there. And if it's a 2-stage trigger, then it's quite short take up. So I don't know, single stage, double stage, I'm not sure, but there's a lot of play there before it breaks. And then the break is quite heavy with quite a bit of creep. Now, it's not terrible, just something I definitely would be swapping out to something nicer, maybe like a Geisley. The magazine situation, I had several failure to feed throughout the day, specifically with the M118 LR. So I don't know if the rifle was short stroking or what the problem was, but I did have a couple of failure to feeds with this plastic magazine. I don't like the plastic magazine in particular because it is proprietary to the rifle. It's not the end of the world. If you're going to invest in this rifle, just make sure you stock up on these magazines as they are proprietary. Recoil impulse and how the rifle felt, to me, felt normal. Maybe a little bit of a sharp jolt, but really not unmanageable. It was fine to shoot off of the tripod. It was fine to shoot out of the prone position. I was able to see my impact from any position, no problem. Really hard to say. I'd have to shoot it up side by side versus a direct impingement rifle, but out here today by itself, really no problem, shot fine to me. I do notice this handguard's quite fat. It's a very thick handguard. Personally, I might like something a little bit thinner, but really not a deal breaker. Just I do notice it's very stout. So as far as the rifle overall, my initial impressions are it's a very nice rifle. It's a very quality rifle. Now, before I shot this video, I was looking up and found that LRP3 package is listed online right now between $6,000 and $8,000, depending on where you find it. Maybe if you shop around and get a better deal. But my opinion of this rifle and that package for that price, that is steep. That is a lot of price, in my opinion, for what you're getting out of this rifle. I feel like the rifle itself is very nice and likely worth what seems to be about $4,000. Seems like that's a fair price for this rifle, and I feel like the performance is there, especially compared to some of the other large frame ARs on the market. But when I look at that package, that LRP3 specifically, that is a stout price. I would have a hard time paying that in today's market. So ultimately, a very nice rifle. I feel like performance was awesome. I had a ton of fun shooting it. I hope you enjoyed watching. You got to let me know in the comments down below, what did you think? Did you enjoy this video? If you've made it this far, I appreciate you sticking around, and I appreciate your support. I want to ask you to help me grow this channel at this point. And the way to do that is really simple. Like this video, comment, let me know your thoughts. But most impactful will be subscribing. If you subscribe to my channel, you'll be in line for my next video drop. You'll see everything that I bring out. I've got a ton of content here in the works, and I hope that you'll join me for those future videos. Finally, don't forget to check me out on Instagram at Mountains Mullets America. It's a great place for us to interact. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you'll stick around and join me in my next video.